Right. The very first thing I think we want to do is we want to add our rocket ship to the game. Let's go ahead and add the rocket ship to the game. In order to do that, I think we're going to create a player class. So let's go ahead and create that player class. So under our game objects, right over there, we're going to go ahead and we're going to call class player. And of course, when we construct an object, we've got to bring in our dunder init method, self, and we're going to create it. When we create the object, we're going to create it with some coordinates where we want that object to appear on the screen. The first thing that's going to happen, we're going to go with self.image is equal to, well, we want it to be equal to a player image. Of course, we haven't loaded in the player image yet, so that means we have to do that. We've already created our function. Let's go down to our game loading assets, and we want to load in player image, which will be equal to game image load. And the image file path will be assets rocket ship.png, and the size will be, what size will it be? It will be 50 by 50. Okay, so now our player self.image, we have a player image. So our player class will have an image. Once we've created the image, next thing we'll need is we'll need to get the rectangle from that image. So we'll go self.image, image rect is equal to self.image.get rect. So that basically means that we'll be getting a rectangle from the image loaded. Okay, once we have self.x and self.y, this will be equal to the coordinates that we will be feeding into the player class when we create it. The next thing we will need is self.width. The self.width is equal to self.image.get width. Then self.height is equal to self.image.get height. Right. Now that we have that, self.image.imageRect.x will be equal to the self. Okay. So what we have now is we've created our player image, and we've created a rectangle surrounding that player image. Okay. Then these two attributes basically is just getting the width of that image, and it's just getting the height of that image. It's just information we're going to use later on. The next thing we're going to do now is, what's happened now is that we've created a rectangle based at the center of the image. So what we need to do now is we actually need to move that rectangle to the top left corner of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to self.image.imageRect.x will be equal to self.x minus self.width, because we got the width of the image, divided by 2. So it's basically like we're dividing that image in half, and we're subtracting that from our x. That just moves the image to the left a bit, the rectangle to the left, because the image and the rectangle are not sitting on the exact same spots at the moment. And we do the same for the image rect.y, will be equal to self.y minus self.height divided by 2. Right. Lastly, what we need is we need to put in the create the self.pos, last few items we need to do. And this is where we're going to bring into the vector2 function. Now, the vector is basically a grid coordinate system that Pygame makes use of the vector2 coordinate system, and it's a very useful function, very useful module in Pygame. that handles a lot of trigonometry and a lot of those kind of things that I did not pay a lot of attention to at school. And I'm very grateful that somebody out there very clever went ahead and really did this stuff. So self dot image rect dot x and self dot image rect dot y. So that will be the position of my rectangle. Then self dot direction will be equal to vector 0 minus 1. That means that the direction of my player character will be, when it starts off, will be facing upwards. And my self dot velocity will be equal to vector 2 as a default variable, which just be basically 0, 0. And then self dot rotation speed, which is the speed of which my player characters will be rotating whenever I turn the left or right buttons. That speed will be object rotation speed. I see I created it as a variable so that it would not be fixed. So let me just go up to my game settings and variables, or go down to my game settings and variables, right over there, and I called it object rotation speed was equal to 3. And while I'm here, object speed is equal to 0.25. Alright, now we've done that, let's go back up quickly to my player class init method. Okay, I have my object rotation speed, and the last attribute I want to create is the self.speed is equal to object speed. So there we go. We basically have the initialization, the init method of our player character. Now we need to go ahead and create a few methods for it. I think the first method we should create is the draw method, draw to screen. So def draw self, I'm going to pass it a surface argument. Okay, let's just put in the comments that we had here. What did I write there? I put in this accepts the rotation angle of the image and the latest object coordinates, then puts the image to the screen. Cool. So because we are handling with the rotating system of because we are rotating the image, because, you know, asteroids, the ship doesn't just fly up, down, left, right. I mean, it can fly in diagonal angles as well. And in order to handle that, there's quite a few little lines that Pygame and Transform make use of. So it's fairly complicated to try and explain, but basically the image gets rotated, and if the image rotates, every time that image rotates, it starts back from the position of 0, and then it rotates to an angle of 5, and it'll go back to 0 and rotate to an angle of 6, and it goes back to 0 and rotates to an angle of 7. It does that so that the image does not lose its integrity. If it had to rotate from position 5 to position 6 to position 7, the image would degrade, and eventually it becomes so degraded that you wouldn't be able to make out the image anymore. So in order to get that done, and from a couple of things that I've looked on online, in order to get this sorted, we're going to go with the following lines of code. So under the draw method, the first thing we're going to put in our angle, a variable called angle. It's going to be our self.direction, which we have in our init method, dot angle 2. If you remember at the top, we wrote there our self.direction was basically facing upwards, 0, 1. Then our angle 2, so here we are, our angle, we're resetting our direction to vector 0, minus 1. So as I mentioned, each time we rotate the image, we rotate it back to position 0. And then once we've taken it from position 0, we then begin to rotate it. Rotated image will be equal to pygame.transform.rotozoom self.image, the angle, and 1.0. So we're taking our image from angle 0 and 1. Alright. So our rotated image size is now equal to vector 2 rotated image dot get size. Right. Now we're going to create our blit position onto the screen, where we're going to actually put the image onto the screen, because now that's obviously changed to from what it was when we loaded the image originally. So our blit pos will be equal to our self.pos minus our rotated image size multiplied by 0.5 or divided by 2. Now the reason why we do that is otherwise the rotated image would rotate on its X and Y top left corner. It would rotate around that instead of rotating in the middle of the image, which is what we want. We need it to rotate around the middle of the object. But once we've added that line, we will then go on to our window.blit rotated image blit position. Okay. So if we go ahead and, alright, we are not calling this anyway, so we need to go back up to our game window. First we need to load in our game asset. Once our phone is loading game objects, there. Let's call our player character. Player, just make sure I'm in the right place. Yes, player is equal to our player class, and in the coordinates we're going to call it in on our screen width because we want them in the middle of the page. Screen height. So there we call our player, we create our player class, but what we don't do is we're still not drawing them onto the screen, so we go into our game window. Once we get to our game window, we then want to call it updating game window. There. And we want to draw the player character on the screen. We got player.draw. So if I run this now, for the draw function, if I remember correctly, we have to pass it a argument. We want to draw it onto the game screen. If we run it now, we should get our player character in the middle of the screen. And there we go. There we are. Obviously there's no functionality, the object is just sitting there in the middle of the screen and it's not doing anything. So the next thing we want to then add to that is some functionality to our game.